I'm Patricia, and this is Investigating Vegan Life with Patricia Kathleen. This series features interviews and conversations I conduct with experts from food and fashion to tech and agriculture, from medicine and science to health and humanitarian arenas. Our inquiry is an effort to examine the variety of industries and lifestyle tenets in the world of vegan life. To that end, we will cover topics that have revealed themselves as common and integral when exploring veganism. The dialogue captured here is part of our ongoing effort to host transparent and honest rhetoric for those of you who, like myself, find great value in hearing the expertise and opinions of individuals who have dedicated their work and lives to their ideals. You can find information about myself and my podcast at patriciakathleen.com. Welcome to Investigating Vegan Life. Now let's start the conversation. Hi everyone, and welcome back. I'm Patricia, your host, and today I'm speaking with Julieanna Hever. She is a plant-based dietitian, author, and TEDx speaker. You can find out more on both of her websites, healthspansolution.com and plantbaseddietitian.com. Welcome, Julieanna.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I look forward to unpacking everything that you've done. And for everyone listening or watching the vodcast, we will first, I'll read a bio on Julieanna, but before I do that, to give you a roadmap of what we'll be looking at today and kind of unearthing, I'm going to look at three of her books. Julieanna's written several books, and namely, I'm going to look at three: the Vegiterranean Diet, number one. The second one will be Plant-Based Nutrition, Idiot's Guide. And the third one will be the Healthspan Solution, published in 2019. And outside of that, we'll unpack kind of the ethos and the philosophy behind that. We will also begin with an academic, personal, and professional platform. I'll ask Julieanna to define kind of how she came to writing these books and other works that she's working on within her websites. We'll also get into some of the specifics and the ethos behind terms and terminology in the current climate, discussing the COVID-19 pandemic briefly, and some of the terms that are ever changing in the world of veganism and vegetarianism. We'll wrap everything up with the goals and advice that Julieanna may have for her current work endeavors or even personal endeavors. So a quick bio as promised on Julieanna. Julieanna Hever is an MSRD CPT, the plant-based dietitian, has a BA in theater and an MS in nutrition, bridging her biggest passions for food, presenting, and helping people. She has authored 5 books, including Healthspan Solution, Plant-Based Nutrition, Idiot's Guide, and the Vegiterranean Diet, and 2 peer-reviewed journal articles on plant-based nutrition for healthcare professionals. She was the host of What Would Julieanna Do?, gave a TEDx talk, and instructed for the eCornell Plant-Based Nutrition Certification Program. She's appeared on the Dr. Oz Show, Harry and the Steve Harvey Show. Julieanna is the co-founder and nutrition director for Ethos, co-host of the podcast Science and Saucery, and she speaks and consults with clients around the globe. You can find her again at plantbaseddietitian.com and healthspansolution.com. So, Julieanna, I'm excited to kind of climb through. You are no stranger to being peppered with questions, but prior to getting into your current works, the 3 books we mentioned, I'm hoping you can kind of draw an academic and professional background and intermixed with your own personal narrative or story regarding vegetarian and vegan lifestyle.
Oh, where do we begin? Well, I was always interested in nutrition and fitness, always, like, since I was a child. I have audio tapes of me teaching aerobics to my cousins and friends at 5 years old. And I was always kind of interested in learning more about what we eat and how it impacts your body and health and all that. And so I just started reading, probably around teenage years, when I stumbled upon a book called Diet for a New America and learned about the implications of what ends up on our plate. It changed me. It kind of had a really profound influence on how I saw our food and our plate. And I decided I wanted to omit animal products from my diet. But at that time, there was no internet and there was no, I didn't have anyone to really go to or ask questions about. So I cut out animal products, tried to navigate the situation kind of by myself. And, of course, my parents were worried about me, as most parents would be, because I wasn't cooking. I was just kind of, doing my own thing. And so they actually enlisted their friend who was a nurse to instill fear in me of being deficient in protein and
Yeah.
iron and, all of that. And it was effective. And I got scared back into, eating the standard traditional diet. But I still had a lot of question marks, and I was sure that there was way more to this story. And I just kept investigating and learning and learning. And then I became a personal trainer while I was an undergraduate because I was an actress in Los Angeles. And this is always the whole, have to lose weight, for camera ready, blah, blah, blah. And that led me to personal training, fell in love with personal training because it brought my passion for fitness into being. And I started training while I was acting on the side. But everyone started asking me questions about nutrition, and I was not willing to just, regurgitate the information I had learned and aggregated in a chapter of a personal training handbook and from my own personal education. So right away, I signed up. I applied for graduate school and a dietetics program, and I was doing that, and I fell in love. It was the first time in my life that I loved school. I was getting straight
Hmm.
A's. Just loved, I was just lapping it all up, the biochemistry, the clinical nutrition, just all of it. And so did my internship and lots of science and learning how to dig deep into the science, something I hadn't really, you know, delved into prior to that as much. And so when I finished graduate school, that's when I started going back and finding out, oh, wait a second. Yes, you can get protein from plants. And yes, you can get iron better sourced from plants.
Hmm.
And once I found all of that and started digging and digging and digging, that was it. I changed my diet. I went all out. I was an adult. It was my time. I could do that. I wasn't living under my parents' roof anymore. And my health changed profoundly. Just personally, I ameliorated lifelong sinus infections and GI problems. I had so many GI problems. I was in the hospital so many times. In fact, so many times, and so many different types of healthcare practitioners that I saw, not once was I asked, "What do you eat?" Which was
Right.
kind of mind blowing. So
Yeah.
it changed my health. And then I started implementing these changes with my clients and was blown away by the efficacy and the results that I was seeing with my clients that I had not seen prior when utilizing the tools that I had been given in graduate school and an internship. So once I started teaching plant-based to my clients and seeing them, I always say results are typical. They would get off their medications. They would reverse diseases that were supposed to be lifelong, like advanced cardiovascular disease or type 2 diabetes or hypertension or hyperlipidemia, things that were not supposed to get better, that doctors don't expect to see get better. They were getting better. And it's been now 15 years, and this every day I keep saying results are typical because we see extraordinary things happen, and I'm so glad there's no looking back after that.
Absolutely. So I'm wondering it sounds like you were already on this career trajectory as you kind of the benefits of the lifestyle started to kick in for you personally. What prompted you to write your first book or endeavor in your first website? Like what was the first movement after you became certified?
That's a good question. I was transitioning because I was personal training, got pregnant at the end of my education. And then we had my first child. And I was like, okay, well, my ex-husband is a physician. So he was like, okay, well, you can, raise the kids. So it's like I dropped my personal training business. And that's when I just finished grad school. So it's like, okay. So I just kept reading and learning, started changing, seeing clients in a different way, not personal training anymore. And per se, like I was going to people's homes, 3 times a week and working them out. Like that was what I was doing prior to having babies. But then I had my 2 children and I was at home and I was going on weekends to see a client or I was trying to integrate telehealth, which is quite interesting because now it's like, this is the best time ever, but this was a
Right.
long time ago before it was really a thing. So while I was at home researching, I guess, and starting to see clients kind of sporadically, I was I was asked to give talks. I started a website. I was getting on social media, and then fortuitously, because I've always wanted to write a book, I just didn't know what or when or how or what. But literally, I got an email. So it must have been from my blog was out there or something, and this agent who's now still my agent reached out and said, we're looking for someone to write. It was at the time Complete Idiot's Guide to Vegan Nutrition. And so I basically had to do a proposal And I'd never done this before. So it was kind of this I feel like it was just this gift. And I got the job. I changed the title to The Complete Idiot's Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition, and it published in 2011. And it's just, and that was it. And then, like, for instance, after that published, I got a phone call from a producer from Dr. Oz show. Like, everything just kind of sort of happened. I think plant-based was becoming a huge thing,
Yeah.
especially that's part of why I was transitioning away from the word vegan, because I like to focus on, I'm a dietitian. I focus on the health aspects of it. I'm not an ethicist, or, I don't like to talk about all the other stuff that are
Well, let's
involved
get
in it.
into that now that you just dropped that. That's one of my biggest questions for all guests that I try to have on in this series. And that is the number one divisive and kind of heated factor right now. How do you yourself personally define vegan and plant-based, those two terms?
Yes. So I did that in my first book, and I've been doing it ever since in every book. And it has kind of evolved and devolved, and it's really interesting. So basically, the most basic way to describe it is a vegan diet is basically an exclusive definition. It means I do not eat or use animals. And that's really the extent of it. It is a diet that does not include animals. It doesn't mean what it is. And that's why I gravitated towards the term whole food plant-based diet, that I was initiated by Dr. T. Colin Campbell. And a whole food plant-based diet means I eat a diet based on whole plant foods. And now we've since evolved this. Our last book, our most recent book, is the Healthspan Solution. And we talk about a Healthspan diet. And we're actually even gravitating more, I guess, away from the terms, just because it's gotten so cloudy, and there's this onset, like, ever since this happened, in the last decade, even, there's been a huge explosion of plant-based foods, which aren't necessarily in alignment with a health span promoting or healthful promoting diet.
Right. And herein lies the rub. Regardless of the vegan term, which a lot of people felt was politicized, you're saying it's based on exclusions rather than inclusions. There's another issue with the plant-based in that it's being attached like fortified with vitamin D was in the 80s. Everyone who wants to push it as something healthy or good for you is saying plant-based. And the item, first of all, is, containing animal products. So vegans are having a hard time attaching themselves to that term anymore. And it's frequently attached to things that have preservatives and that are notoriously unhealthy. And so do you foresee something coming off the ocean that's, even a newer term than plant-based, or do you think it still will be like a guiding light for people trying to do or will it be whole foods plant-based, which is a new argument about this, it has to be like a complete food. How do you foresee that?
Actually, a whole food plant-based diet is not new. It's an old term. And the way it's being changed, like things like, saying I'm not only, what's the word? It's I can't think of the word right now that people are using a lot of, I'm blanking on the word. There's a word for it. Like, that's basically another word, another like euphemism for an omnivore diet. It'll come to me, but we did change the terminology. We are saying health span now because, well, my focus now is on health span and wellness. And we have kind of defined that now, the diet, as a diet based on vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in tasty combinations of soup, salad, sides, and sweets. So we're kind of taking it to the next level because there's so much obfuscation when it comes to nutrition and diet, and like just everywhere. And a lot of that stems from what we call macro confusion, the use of carbs, protein, and fat to define food groups and to define how we eat and what we avoid. And it's absolutely meaningless, absolutely confusing. And we want to get that terminology out of our conversations. We want to focus on foods. So yes, it's going to change, and it's, people are going to call whatever, now I hear plant-based diets include meat, but don't exclusive. It just gets so wishy-washy, and it doesn't really matter that much because it's really semantics.
Well, and I think that's the key term of having everyone who you're looking at when you're looking at worlds of veganism or any other dietary restriction or inclusive.
Sorry.
Flexitarian. Yeah.
Word.
which are people that are, you know, using meat flexibly or the integration of vegetables flexibly, depending on how you look at it. However, I think it's very key to understand that you need to make people define their terms, which is why I asked you to define the difference for you between vegan and plant-based, because anytime you're looking at a company or an author, you need to make sure, because these terms are so flexible right now, as is everything in our society in the United States, things are being redefined across the board. I think it's key to make sure that you realize how people are defining themselves. And to that end, I'm hoping that we can look at the Vegiterranean diet. And let me read you a quick synopsis and then get your take on what that particular book is back. And then we'll double back to the Plant-Based Nutrition Idiot's Guide, because I know that that was revamped in 2018, but you mentioned that in 2012, the Vegiterranean Diet, it takes the med to a whole new level by focusing on whole plant foods that promote long-term wellness and ideal weight management. You can reap the benefits from the most researched and beloved diet, made even healthier, the Vegiterranean diet. And then the things that it offers is comprehensive nutritional info, shopping lists, 40 recipes, flexible meal plans, and strategy for overall health. So when you launched this in 2012, it was, again, a little bit before its time, when, you know, Mediterranean diets were just kind of being analyzed for, obviously, their cardiovascular health and things of that nature. What was your main impetus for writing this book?
Well, yes, actually, I was looking at the literature on the Mediterranean diet that's quite old, you know, since maybe 50s, 60s, started in the 1950s, 1960s at that point. It's like that's when it all kind of evolved. And what happens every year is that we get these reports, you know, the best diet, the healthiest diet, because people are always kind of looking for that. And the Mediterranean diet kind of wins almost every year, you know, the healthiest diet for cardiovascular disease, for everything. And I was looking at the literature on whole food plant-based diets, where quite literally it's the only diet that has ever reversed advanced stage cardiovascular disease and type 2 diabetes. It has so much amazing evidence supporting the reduction in medication, all the things I noted before that I've witnessed now with clients. And there's just a plethora of research showing that. So I kept wondering, well, why is the Mediterranean diet getting all of the props when look at what a plant-based diet really can do? And so that made me kind of want to dig deep and go all the way back to the beginning of the so-called Mediterranean diet, which really originated with Ansel Keys' work. And that's where it was really brought back to the United States. And what I determined and what I looked at was, well, wait a minute, the actual diet was mostly a whole food plant-based diet, predominantly based on eating whole plants. It wasn't the fish and the olive oil and the red wine that we've kind of interpreted it now, you know, at convenience. It's like, oh, I'm just going to pour some olive oil all over my steak and have a glass of red wine, and I'm going to get all the benefit. And that just simply isn't true. So I kind of identified a few reasons why it was effective, and mostly because it's a whole food plant-based diet.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it unpacks it fairly well from the skimming I did of it. Turning back to Plant-Based Nutrition Idiot's Guide, you offer a new food triangle, which I know is kind of the beginner's look into, you know, reassessing what we all were taught as children about food. I think still are. The food triangle, as far as I know, is still ridiculously disproportionate and funded by the industries that it represents. But I think that offering the new perspective of the macronutrients that you were kind of discussing, and the latest science on the different priorities of common recipes and different things like that, health span, as you mentioned, and menus. When you talk about, you know, a complete guide, do you feel like someone who doesn't know anything about veganism can go out, picture or purchase this book, garner a really good sense of the diet of plant-based, you know, whole food plant-based diets, as well as kind of implementation steps? Or does it feature more one aspect than the other?
No, it's an idiot's guide. And I mean, some people say, how could this be an idiot's guide? It's really scientifically intensive, but it is used for the layperson, and it is a reference. We put so much into this book. It's like all the whys, all the research behind it. We weren't allowed to reference in that book. So we're excited about our new book where we were able to include the references. And we both, between me and my partner, Ray Cronice, we have about 5 papers on plant-based diet that are really well referenced. specifically for physicians and healthcare professionals. But that's what we love about the Idiot's Guide Plant-Based Nutrition is that it's for everyone. Like anyone could read it, understand it. And then it's not only the whys in the background, but it's like a chapter for children and infants and pregnancy and seniors and athletes. We work with a lot of athletes, a chapter on weight loss, like all the different populations and time of life where things may change nutritionally. And it's like everything, all what you need, what to focus on, and then how to do it. So we have, I think there's at least 50 recipes in the book, and what about nutrition and supplements. And there's basically like everything you need to know about eating plants is in that book.
Cool. I mean, that sounds great. So then it begs the question, the Healthspan Solution, which, and let me read you a quick synopsis we scrubbed from online, not my words. Share the simple and effective diet that has allowed their clients to lose weight, reverse disease, reduce or eliminate medication use, and achieve optimal health. This accessible and easy to follow guide examines the health risks posed by typical Western eating habits and explains how a diet rich in vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices can lead to lower blood pressure, healthy weight management, and longer life. So if Idiot's Guide is to this comprehensive understanding, then would you argue that the Healthspan Solution gets into disease and disease prevention?
Well, okay. So the first book, The Idiot's Guide, has everything you need to know about eating plants. What I've always wanted and dreamed about and fantasized about was having a colorful cookbook with pictures and images and all of that. And that's what we did with the Healthspan Solution. I came together with Ray Cronice almost 4 years ago, and our work was so synergistic. He brought all of this healthspan and metabolism, both two very different subjects, but that was his specialty. And so it's what we kind of combined our work. We both been running around the world saying things like carbs are not a food group. We both had memes that we had made, and everyone else was looking at us like we had two heads, which was kind of funny because our paths had never crossed. So basically, this book is kind of a beautiful collaboration of everything we've wanted to do. He went to culinary school, and while I've been, I didn't, and I as a dietitian, I'm always asked to do recipes. I had my own TV show where I was doing recipes and developing recipes, and that just kind of evolved, and I had to teach myself. Well, he's got all of those actual skills that he learned. So it's been really extraordinary to put our heads together and our work together. And I think that Healthspan Solution is a culmination of that. It is a cookbook. It's got over 100 recipes. So the emphasis is on food. But what we did really kind of crazy different is that the first 4 chapters, instead of doing like pantry lists and ingredients and basics, what you would find in most cookbooks, we concisely compacted a ton of science into 4 chapters. We were so grateful that our publishers, DK, enabled us and allowed us to kind of really just deep dive into the science, because we wanted to share, we have all these great tools like a food triangle, which is not the food pyramid, we've changed it because we want to change the language of food. We want to get away from macro confusion, and we define all of that in the first 4 chapters. So it's kind of really dense, and you can get everything into 4 chapters. And then we had a great time making delicious soup, salads, sides, and sweets. We got rid of breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, and desserts. And we don't care about time of day eating. We just want you to eat that list of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices. So we're really excited about this book. And it's different. It's got very similar information distilled, but it's mostly focused on how to do it, what to eat, and how delicious eating this way really is.
Yeah, it's so, and I think the photography probably captured on a lot of your pages is, representational of the vibrancy of the way of eating as well. I was speaking to a former guest on the series just a couple of days ago who was, a chef, and she just said, we're drawn towards vibrant colors, and, the plant-based diet is never, there's nothing more fulfilled than that. That's why they have to put those chemicals into other things to make them more vibrant, the salmon that you're eating and things of that nature that you buy raw. I'm curious, you mentioned the first few chapters being chock full of, all of your scientific research and things like that. What are the top 3 takeaways for you, the most poignant parts about those chapters and the research that you're bringing? Like your boiled down tinctures, your axiomatic 3 or 4 points from those chapters?
It's a good question. I would say, because we're trying to change the language again, macro confusion is a topic that is quite unique and one of our biggest call to action to people, because we want people to think about food differently. And that's what we do in our lifestyle transformation company, is that our goal is to change people's relationship with food. That is what we love doing. And I think that we kind of define that in the book. I would say the second thing maybe is the 6 daily threes. We talk about how to prioritize foods, because we think about that big list of foods and all the, I mean, I always say infinite combinations that we could put those ingredients together in, tasty combinations. I would say that, you want to prioritize from a nutritional standpoint, because I still, I'm a dietitian and I still want people to get all their nutrition. And so we use the 6 daily threes as a way to look at exactly what to kind of prioritize overall. And then, gosh, if I have to pick a third one, talking about Healthspan, we're talking about, there's a lot of data on Healthspan, and where Healthspan and plant-based nutrition collide, and where there's this beautiful, cross link, is that perhaps one of the reasons, we always talk about the anti-inflammatory benefits and what you're not getting by avoiding meat and animal products. All of those different things are really important, and why we have all of these extraordinary health advantages of eating plants. But where the Healthspan evidence shows, and where it kind of comes together, is that the only way we've ever extended healthspan and longevity in all model organisms tested in a nutritional perspective, from yeast to rodents to our primate cousins, is with dietary restriction without malnutrition. So while I was going around for 10, 12 years before I met Raymond, saying, defending the adequacy of a plant-based diet, you can get your, like I said, where I came from, you can get your protein, you can get your iron, perhaps the reason it's so healthful is because of what it naturally limits. So maybe not having not being obsessed with protein like so many people are, that is perhaps what is contributing to these health span and just wellness benefits of
Right.
eating a plant-based diet.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It's a good flip on its head. I like that idea, and investigating things from different angles. I'm wondering, you clearly are in conversation with a great deal of colleagues. Your partner that you've done a lot of these books with, endeavoring. I'm wondering about any realizations you've had with the COVID-19 pandemic as of late, in conversation with these plant-based diets and the benefits that come from, obviously, your history with health increase, performance, all of that. Returning to optimal health. Have you come away with any, everyone has kind of reignited or refounded their relationship with healthy living. The world at large is starting to question unhealthy living and histories of where the food's coming from and things of that nature. But I'm wondering if you personally have had any new realizations in this time of quarantine and the pandemic about your own personal knowledge or trajectory with plant-based living?
It's a good question. I don't think anything has changed for me personally. I just think it strengthens my resolve for what I've seen prior to this and what I've read and learned. And, a whole food plant-based diet is extraordinary because of all of its, foundational advantages, like, anti-inflammatory properties are crucial, not taking in things that are disease promoting, the compounds that we find in animal products. The whole reason that we ended up here, perhaps, all the zoonotic impacts of eating animals and producing animals, what's happening, when you look at factory farming and antibiotic usage, that's where 70 to 80% of antibiotics are used, which is obviously propagating the whole super bugs and all these things that are potentially huge and could potentially cause more problems in the future. So I think that all of that, there's so many advantages to sticking to plants. I think it's been interesting as a dietitian and as a coach for my clients, because a lot of people they always come to me, and this is kind of the first time where they're like, ooh, I have to get back in the kitchen, or ooh, maybe I can't get meat at the store. And so it's kind of forced people to rethink food. Like you said beautifully, it's a great opportunity. I think this is a great time. We've been trying to inspire our clients to, be comfortable with just sticking to these staple foods, but it hasn't changed our approach. I would say there's going to be a lot of interesting stuff that comes out of this from a research perspective. I'm already starting to read on the initial stuff about vitamin D. We just
Mm,
had a wonderful interview with Paul Stamets, who's the expert in mushrooms, and that the efficacy of just of mushrooms as medicine. So
mhm.
there's so many amazing properties that you can get from a plant-based diet. There's so many reasons to avoid animal products, and I think that this just adds to that, you know, just a very enormous reason to consider, moving in this direction. I never like to tell people what they have to eat or why and try to convince anyone. Like I stopped trying to convince people several years ago, but I'm happy to share as much information as I can and help people go through that process. But it's a very personal decision what you put in your body. But we've seen a lot of. It'd be interesting to see later people's diets, and we've the other, I think, one of the very interesting things I've noticed too is that what we're hearing about, that the people that have the more severe implications after they've contracted the disease, or the people that the morbidity and the mortality rates with COVID-19 happen to be coinciding with these comorbidities. And what are those comorbidities are things that we know can be uh, your risk can be reduced by a plant-based diet: type 2 diabetes, obesity, all these things that we know a plant-based diet can help ameliorate, would help decrease your risk. Possibly we'll see this can reduce your risk for certain things like what we're seeing with coronavirus.
Absolutely. All very good points. I'm wondering, looking forward to the future, a lot, again, what the pandemic has allowed a lot of people is time to reflect about future prospects and goals and revamp what's important to them. What do you see on your horizon? Is there another book in play? What is happening for you? I know you've got your podcast going and other current endeavors, but what goals do you have moving forward?
Yes. Well, we've been, so busy with clients. Fortunately, a lot of people need to, get healthy, and they're coming to us, and we really just want to be able to help as many people as we can. And we have to turn people away because there's only two of us right now. So we are trying to scale our company so that we could help as many people as possible. And we're building an automated course. So it'll be a 42-day, a 6-week health span transformation program that'll be all online. And so we're working on developing content for that so that we can expand our horizons and just help as many people as possible. And there's other projects. As our next book, we are working right now. Our publishers are asking for the proposal, so we're working on that. And there's just so many exciting things that we're doing
That's
right now.
wonderful. I look forward to all of it. I can't wait to investigate more about it when it comes out. We are out of time, but Juliana, I wanted to say thank you so much for speaking with us today and giving us all of your information.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. For those of you who have been listening, we've been speaking with Julieanna Hever. She's a plant-based dietitian, author, and TEDx speaker. You can locate more information about her on both websites, healthspansolution.com and plantbaseddietitian.com. Thank you for those of you who have been listening. We really appreciate your time today. Until we speak again next time, remember to eat clean, eat well, stay safe, stay in love, and always bet on yourself. Sancha.